I have a high risk of against coronavirus.
まあそうね、staying at home is probably the best way.
Yeah.
The best way forward. なるほど。
I'm afraid I got coronavirus.
But you don't. Did you feel symptoms?
Symptoms? What?
Symptoms. You got symptoms. You felt like you had pain in your lungs or
No. Currently nothing.
Oh, okay.
Currently I am very feel good.
Okay. How about Takai-san? He didn't feel good.
No, he got the coronavirus last week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he stayed.
Yeah.
He had a fever for 3 days.
Just influenza.
No, coronavirus.
Could be.
That's
But actually, I heard that people who had the coronavirus will be the elite of the immediate future, né? Because they apparently have built up antibodies. So the market value for people who had coronavirus will increase relative to people who didn't have coronavirus. Because if you didn't have coronavirus, then you can still attract it. So you are less attractive for employers. So if you had the coronavirus and you build up these antibodies, that would make you more attractive for employers to work in more risk-bearing occupations. So if you got the coronavirus and you survived, then you're lucky.
Really?
But there was a talk about it on the. It's actually a big discussion. I don't know if it's a big discussion in Japan, but in Europe it's a big discussion, and in the United States it's a big discussion. If they should actually just make the entire population resistant by actually deliberately infecting people. So immunization of the population.
Immunization.
So, yeah, and then there was talk of people like who really needed to work, like taxi drivers, like daily wage workers, to actually infect themselves so that they would be able to continue working in a pandemic situation.
Do you know that the New York City they just random test for the ordinary people and 3,000 people, and 20% is already infected before. It means calculating total population of New York City, they supposed to be 2 million people infected before. That's a statistic they said. So it means many people infected, but majority people with a doctor they fix already.
Right.
So this is their statistics. Tokyo is the same.
Yeah, actually, one of my friends in New York City already got coronavirus for more than 1 week, but now she is totally fine.
Really?
Yeah. She said me now everything is okay. Yeah.
Apparently, there are some people who didn't have any symptoms at all.
Yeah, I think so.
And I saw the TV today is that Sweden, the government is just letting it go to let the total population get collective immunization.
Right. I don't think that they would explain it themselves as letting it go totally, but they are more liberal in their policies. But I think from outside of Japan, people are also looking at Japan critically. Like they are not being strict enough. Their measures are not going to protect the population, especially from countries where they have a total lockdown policy, like Spain and Italy and many other European countries. But they look at don't you need social distancing, like 1.5 meters or so? I don't think there's any any measures like that over here. So, well, so what do you think of all these the movements now in the States? But also, I think I hear it more and more that people, they feel it's like time to open up the economy and to open up the country and start resuming like normal life.
Yeah, so otherwise I have stopped my working. Yeah, I'm supposed to be out, but still staying in Japan, and yeah.
But do you need to be overseas in order to be able to work? Well, maybe it's a little bit more cumbersome, but I noticed that actually I really don't need to be in an office to actually do my work, fortunately.
Wow, yeah.
It's really not necessary to be in the office. Like if everybody's on the same like mindset, then we can easily work from home. And what's also very surprising is that actually, like if I would expect like this if this would happen in the Netherlands, like a lot of people they would only work like maybe 2-3 hours a day, and the rest they would watch Netflix or television or do whatever, but not work. But I can actually measure how much time people spend working, and really working, not just being logged in, but actually working. And it's surprising actually. I think the majority of people are actually working more hours now than they were working when they were in the office.
Yeah, that's true.
真面目だよ.
Yeah, it's good for the company, and yeah, the younger generation will find this good time. Yeah, they're finding that tradition of coming to the office every day at a fixed time from 9 p.m. 6 p.m. It's just superstition.
Right.
Then they will work if you feel it needed. Then if they don't feel they need to work if it's not necessary.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's really true. Like I really feel like okay, the input is not important, the output is important. It doesn't matter how much time you put in. If you can do your job in 10 hours a week, then congratulations to you. Working 10 hours should be enough. But if you feel it takes 60 hours, don't expect a pat on the back if other people can do it in 10.
Yeah, more reasonable instead of spending 1 hour time every day by train to get just to get off this.
Right.
Then we feel on this. Yeah, 1 hour.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of people they spend 1 hour, right? Not only to get to the office, but also to go home. So you lose like 2 hours of productivity there.
Okay, let's start. What are you going to do today?
So we were talking about the Pearl Harbor attack, basically.
Pearl Harbor attack.
Oh, Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, again, the same question for you.
The same question for me.
Why Japan attacked Pearl Harbor? Interesting question, right?
Right.
Why Abe distributed masks for every people in Japan? Same question.
Well, okay, so basically, so we talked about this last week, right? So there is I think there is a rationality if you put yourself into the time and conditions that led up to that moment. So at that moment, it must have been a logical decision. Maybe it would not have attracted the majority, but it did make at least some sense. Otherwise, an entire country would not come to that decision. But so what I feel is that probably in that situation, it was either do it or don't do it, of course. And if you would not do it, that would mean that ultimately you would lose the war. That basically you would, that was the viewpoint, I believe. So it would not be possible to sustain the Japanese war effort if they didn't have the capacity to bring enough raw materials and resources to the front lines. So maybe if they would let the United States out of there, but the United States would put an embargo on them and would threaten the supply lines to the vast empire that they created in a couple of years' time, then it would crumble. It would fall apart. So then the question is, okay, that's basically the same as throwing the towel, as saying, okay, well, surrendering. And that was something that was actually the power of Japan, that what made them unique, that even though they had fewer men, these men were more dedicated, more willing, more prepared to sacrifice themselves for their country than any other country in the region, and basically, I would argue, any other country in the world. So if they would, basically, it was in Japan's culture and attitude at that time that the only way to not to lose is to go forward, to attack. So attack is the best defense in this case. And that's probably that they were in that mode, like, okay, we said A, we said B, now we can only say C, because if we are going to retreat, that will be a betrayal to ourselves and to the country.
So
that's why they
still doesn't make sense for me.
Do you think that in that time?
Yeah, because consider for the American military power 10 times rather than Japan. Yeah. Everybody didn't know that at that time.
But then the question is, are we going to accept that as a fact and do the rational thing? While all those years before that, they have been confronted with superior military power from the Russians. They had invaded countries that were much larger than they were. They had beaten the colonial armies. I think they were feeling that they were undefeatable maybe at the time, and because part of that was that because of the Japanese mentality, because they were prepared to go where nobody had gone before them, completely total self-sacrifice for the country and every citizen, so including their leaders. So why would the leaders in that case do something that is rational? A lot of what their civilians were doing, what their soldiers were doing, was not rational either.
Why they decided to sacrifice themselves?
Because I think that it was not so bad, because of their institution, because of the religion, because of the way that everything had a purpose. It's kind of common to what we see in modern day suicide bombers and suicide people who commit to ISIS or in the Islam, that basically they become martyrs. And martyrs is, if you believe in the continuity of life and in martyrdom and the rewards that you get from that, then all of a sudden it starts to make sense. You create a rational grounds to do what without that belief system.
But at that
is
time, America
totally
was.
irrational.
But at that time, America was no threat for Japanese government, Japanese people. The most threat is Russia, and the USSR will invade to northern territory of China. So they need to prepare for Russia instead of America.
No,
Why no?
no, I don't think that that Russia at that time was the biggest threat. The United States were already at odds with Japan, and Russia was not directly interfering with Japan. They had a treaty. So Russia was not a threat. The United States was a threat. They put an embargo on. They demanded that they will retreat from Indochina, and Japan didn't want to do that. So war was unavoidable, and they were also threatening to cut off the Japanese supply routes.
But considering embargo, but at that time, American population, they didn't consider waging war against Japan. 80% of population against.
But maybe not waging war, but that didn't mean that they were on friendly terms. That didn't mean that they put an embargo. And what if there was something that Japan needed desperately, because they expanded their empire way too big, and it was impossible to efficiently put raw materials in the places where they were needed. So they were totally dependent upon supply lines. If they would not realize that very quickly and not be able to put the resources to actually build up these supply lines, it would crumble like there was no tomorrow. It was already happening. Why did so many people die when they were building the Burmese railway line? Was actually basically because there were not enough supplies. For whatever Japan was doing, there was no plan for how are we actually going to make sure that we have the supplies there. But the same story in China. Why were so many people killed? Because they were completely dependent on what they would find in the countries that they were going to, that they were invading. So they needed the local to get the resources, the food, from local people. So Japan was totally, that was their biggest threat, not being able to bring oil, to bring food to their troops, and then the whole thing would fall apart like a house of cards.
They embargo, okay, they need oil, right? So they just going down to south to get oil in Indonesia instead of waging war.
Right, but then
against
they
America.
still need to bring that oil into the hands of their troops, the local troops, right? And that is very difficult if the United States is actually threatening to limit that. They were seeing that the United States was not going to let go of Asia. So then the question is, are we going to wait for this to happen, or are we going to strike first? And they deemed that, okay, since it is unavoidable that the United States will get involved and going to make our lives miserable, it's better to strike first, because that will give us a military advantage.
If they didn't go attack Pearl Harbor, America will not join the war at the first couple years.
Well, actually, from what I saw in the video, is that the United States were already preparing that, and they were already starting to put up an embargo and enforcing and making threats to Japan that they seriously had to leave Indochina.
That is just preparing war, just only the American government and military, not people.
Well, that is, I mean, given I believe that this documentary was made during the war, but by the end of the war. So this is not something that that they. I mean, the timing is significant. It was made after Pearl Harbor was already a fact. So you could be right. There was no plan to engage in war, and they probably would have preferred to avoid it because they were also planning a war in Europe. So you don't want to have a two-front war. That's what you want to avoid as much as you can. But the United States was asserting itself as a superpower already during World War II. So apparently Japan felt that it had to preemptively strike in order to avoid being crumbled afterwards.